In this episode, we talk about a bill concerning the Election Commission of India. We also give you a brief update on the security breach at the Parliament yesterday. But first, we talk about the laws regarding organ transplant in India. Hi, I'm Utsa Sarmin and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Earlier this month, the UK-based newspaper The Telegraph revealed a cash for kidney racket and claimed that Delhi's Apollo Hospital is involved in the racket, where poor villagers from Myanmar are being made to sell their kidneys to rich patients from the country itself. When we spoke to the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt, she told us more about the investigation.
So what they found is a lot of the recipients were rich people who were paying the poor people from villages to sort of donate the kidney for money. And the transplants were happening here in India. And the Telegraph investigation looked at basically a recipient from Myanmar who has admitted to paying for the kidney. And they have also spoken to some agents like middlemen and a person from Apollo who is basically responsible. His designation was operations manager. And from what we've learned from Apollo Delhi team, they were basically responsible for organizing these health talks whenever the Indian doctors would go there and also promote about various facilities that are available in the Delhi hospital. So the Telegraph spoke to these people in Myanmar and found them very willingly admitting to forging documents, etc., to prove that the recipient and donors were indeed family members. And then they would facilitate this whole kidney donation and the donor would receive monetary compensation for the organ. Now, the Indraprastha Apollo Hospital in Delhi has refused these claims. They've said that they have all the proper documentation in place and there is no scam, so to say, where, people were paid for the kidney. They've just said that they were relatives who were donating their kidney and we've done the surgery. However, Telegraph says it's otherwise.
Now, this is not the first time that fraudulent activities involving organ transplants have been brought to light. In fact, this is not the first time that Apollo Hospital itself was accused of being a part of the cash for kidney racket. And this happens despite the presence of a law, the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act, which forbids such exchange of organs for money. To know more about the issue, we speak to Anonna in this segment. So Anonna, can you first tell us why the focus on kidney? Why is the organ the most targeted one?
So this is not the first time that a kidney racket has been highlighted. There have been, in fact, several kidney scams that have been unearthed in the country. Two most recent, I think last year there was a scam that was highlighted in Delhi and there was another scam involving people from Apollo Hospital in 2016 or 17 as well. So it's not the first time. Kidneys are one of the most targeted organs, so to say, when it comes to these scams. That's because if you look at the geography of India, we have several kidney transplant centers now. It's one of the cheapest, one of the easiest transplants, which has the least amount of consequence for the donor. So the surgery is pretty easy and it's available across around 500 centers in India. The cost is about 5 lakhs. In comparison, if you look at liver, the liver transplant would cost anywhere about like 25 to 30 lakhs. So if the transplant itself costs that much, then somebody who also has to pay for the organ, you wouldn't find too many willing participants. But with 5 lakhs, it also means that people are willing to forgo the procedures and actually buy the organ because it's a cheaper, so to say, procedure. Then another reason is that kidney can survive outside the body for a long time. Heart, it's a few hours, but when it comes to kidneys, it can survive up to a day outside the body. So it can be transplanted easily later on. Storing it is, easier.
And we understand that these kinds of rackets are also prevalent because the organs are also not easily available for transplantation. Could you talk about that aspect?
So, of course, one of the most important issues when it comes to any kind of organ scam, especially kidney scam, is that there is a huge gap in demand and supply. So, for example, it is estimated that every year around 2 lakh people go into end stage kidney failure and need a kidney transplant or dialysis. Now, last year's, if we look at last year's figure, including both living and deceased donations, there were about 12,000 kidney transplants. So all the others have to depend on dialysis. And now the government is creating more and more dialysis facilities in the country, but even then there is a huge gap in the supply and demand of kidneys, and which is why we see these rackets happening.
Right, and this happened despite the presence of a law, the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act. Could you talk about what it says about organ transplantation?
So any kind of organ transplant, there are two types. One is deceased organ donation and one is living organ donation. So deceased is, suppose a person meets with an accident or has any kind of medical emergency and they are declared brain dead. Their organs can, with the consent of the family of course, be removed and donated to unknown recipients. So the people who are donating would never know who gets these organs. These are allocated through NOTO, which is the nodal agency looking after governing organ transplants in the country. So they allocate it on the basis of need and where they find a match for these organs. Then when it comes to living organ donation, it is usually a family member. So the act allows for living donation by near relatives. Near relatives would be, say, siblings, mother, father, children, or grandparents or grandchildren. So someone who is a close relative is allowed to donate for living donations. Even, distant relatives and friends are allowed to donate organs under the current law. But in such cases, the scrutiny is much more. And they also look at whether there has been any financial transaction or whether there is any financial incentive. And there are committees that look into this before allowing a transplant to happen.
And could you tell us what the law says about penalties if someone is found involved in such illegal activities?
So if anybody is found offering to or advertising to or even, facilitating any kind of illegal organ donation where the recipient and donor are not related or they don't even know each other, but you forge the documents to show that these people are related. So anybody who does that, as per the act, they can be imprisoned between 5 to 10 years and can be fined up to 1 crore for it.
Right, and Anonna, could you tell us what kinds of concerns does this issue raise?
So, of course, it's concerning that we have hospitals such as Apollo being named, and this is not the first time they have been named in a kidney racket. It does reduce the trust of people in the hospitals, and more importantly, it results in a problem even for deceased donations. So if you look at data from abroad, most of their organ transplants use organs from deceased persons. But when it comes to India, our percentage is about, say, 15% or so of our organ donation happens with deceased organs. And one of the major challenges that people who work as transplant coordinators, who essentially interact with the families when they are grieving, to convince them to donate organs, one of the challenges they face is families coming back to them and saying that, you will sell these organs. And these kind of news raise those suspicions more, making it much more difficult for them to convince people to donate organs, through deceased donation, which is, there is no monetary component involved in that from any side.
And next we talk about a bill concerning the Election Commission of India. On Tuesday, the centre moved amendments seeking to retain the status of the election commissioners on par with Supreme Court judges. What this means is that election commissioners will continue to enjoy the same salary and perks that a Supreme Court judge would. This comes months after the Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners' appointment, conditions of service and terms of office Bill 2023 was first introduced in the Rajya Sabha. Apart from downgrading the status of the EC to that of a cabinet secretary, the bill also sought to tweak the manner in which appointments take place. In fact, it sought to repeal the earlier Election Commission, Conditions of Service of Election Commissioners and Transaction of Business Act 1991, as it did not address the issue of appointments. And over the last few months, the bill faced a fair bit of criticism from members of the Election Commission and sections of the opposition. The Indian Express's Damini Nath, who covers the Election Commission for the paper, joins my colleague Rahel Philipose in this segment to talk about the bill and why it was criticized.
So, Damini, can you start by telling us what exactly this bill is and what it proposes?
Right. So this bill is to regulate the appointment and service conditions of the Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioners of India. The bill was first introduced in the Rajya Sabha on the 10th of August, and it was discussed, amended, and passed on the 12th of December.
Right. And Damini, why exactly was it proposed in the first place?
So this bill was introduced because of a Supreme Court judgment in March. The Supreme Court was hearing a case about the appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioners. Till now, there has been no law to regulate the appointment of the ECI. And in its judgment, the Supreme Court gave an option of a committee, which would be chaired by the Prime Minister, would include the Chief Justice and the Leader of the Opposition. And the Supreme Court said that this arrangement would continue till Parliament enacts a law. So with that in mind, the government brought this bill so that they could make the committee as per their own requirement.
Right. But soon after it was tabled, there was a fair bit of backlash, both from EC members as well as certain sections of the opposition. Why was this bill so controversial?
So the criticism from the opposition and former CECs is a little different. The opposition basically said that this bill would allow the government to select people who would favor the government or the ruling party, because the Prime Minister or Cabinet Minister could easily overrule the Leader of Opposition. So their problem was that the Election Commission would not be independent, would not be able to work freely. But for the former CECs, their issue was more about the status of the Election Commission, because the first version of this bill had equated the Election Commission with the Cabinet Secretary. Till now, the Election Commission gets a salary which is similar to that of a Supreme Court judge, basically giving them an equal status. The bill that was introduced in August decided to change this from a Supreme Court judge to the Cabinet Secretary.
Right. And could you walk us through what happened on Tuesday? What were some of the amendments that were moved by the centre?
So after the bill was first introduced in August, like we discussed, there was a lot of criticism of the bill, and a group of former CECs even wrote to the Prime Minister asking them to reconsider this change in the status. As a result, the Law Minister brought a bunch of amendments to the bill on Tuesday, and the bill was passed with these amendments, basically keeping the status of the election commissioners equal to that of a Supreme Court judge instead of a cabinet secretary. And while the discussion was on, the opposition again raised the issue that the government would be able to decide who to make the chief election commissioner and election commissioners, and the ECI would not be able to function freely. The opposition eventually staged a walkout on this issue.
Right. And what happens now that the bill has been passed?
So now that this bill has been passed by the Rajya Sabha, it will go to the Lok Sabha and it will be discussed there. And if there are any more amendments, that will be taken up and it is likely to be passed this session. This is important because the next vacancy in the Election Commission will arise in February, when one of the election commissioners, Anup Chandra Pandey, is expected to retire. So the government wants to have this committee in place and start looking at replacements for this election commissioner before that.
And in the end, we talk about a security breach at Parliament. In a massive security breach at the Parliament complex today, 2 people jumped into the chamber from the public gallery in the afternoon and opened canisters that emitted a yellow gas. Televised footage of the proceedings show members attempting to catch the intruders, who were identified as Sagar Sharma and Manoranjan D, as they climbed from desk to desk. Both houses were adjourned moments later. Recounting the incident, leader of Congress in Lok Sabha, Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary, said that 2 young men jumped from the gallery and something was hurled by them from which gas was emitting.
ऐसा हो गए, सदन के अंदर उतर गए और हाथ में कुछ थी, उसे भारी भड़कम मतलब गैस निकलते थे और थोड़ा मतलब सदन के अंदर हमारे सारे एमपी जितने साथी हैं वो पकड़ लिए दोनों को. कोई सिक्योरिटी वाले नहीं, सारे एमपी उनको पकड़ लिए. तो उसके बाद सिक्योरिटी फोर्स भी उनको बाहर निकाले. बाकी तो
Meanwhile, outside the Parliament building, 2 more people, 42-year-old Neelam and 25-year-old Amol Shinde, they were protesting with yellow smoke. And eventually they were detained by local police outside New Delhi's Transport Bhavan. Following the breach, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla mentioned that the attack took place on the anniversary of the 2001 Parliament attack and thanked the security personnel and the MPs who stopped the two men yesterday.
जो आज घटना घटी है वह हम सबके लिए चिंता का विषय है और गंभीर घटना भी है। घटना के समय घटना करने वाले व्यक्तियों पर जिस तरीके से हमारे माननीय संसद सदस्यों ने, यहाँ के सुरक्षा कर्मियों ने, यहाँ के मार्शल ने, चेंबर स्टाफ ने, सभी लोगों ने जिस तरीके से मुस्तैदी के साथ घटना घटित करने वाले लोगों को पकड़ा और निर्दयता के साथ, मैंने खुद ने भी देखा, निर्दयता के साथ वह उनको दबोचा, मैं उन सबको बधाई देता हूं। आज के दिन ही 2001 में भी इसी तरीके से केंद्रीय सुरक्षा बल, संसद सुरक्षा, यहाँ के स्टाफ, यहाँ के लोगों ने जिस बहादुरी निर्दयता के साथ उस हमले को विफल किया, आज हमने ऐसे हमले को फिर विफल करने के लिए जो सामूहिक प्रयास किए, इसके लिए सदन उन सबको धन्यवाद देता है।
He also said that the entire matter is being investigated thoroughly. Now, after the incident, the entry of visitors inside the complex has also been suspended. In the meantime, the opposition questioned the security configuration of the new parliament building.
This is the anniversary of a tragic assault in Parliament where 7 of our people died. I mean, we can't, take these matters lightly. The new building does not seem to be configured very well when it comes to security by comparison with the arrangements in the old building. And so all of these concerns...
Sharing a photo of the attack on social media platform X, Trinamool Congress MP Saket Gokhale slammed the centre for allegedly turning the parliament into a tourist spot and compromising the safety and security of MPs. The opposition also demanded an explanation from Union Home Minister Amit Shah and adjournment of the proceedings. We will come out with a detailed segment in our upcoming episodes as additional information emerge regarding this breach. You are listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. It was written and produced by me, Utsa, Sarmin, Rahel, Philipose and Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it and share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.